When I come on here every so often and make a film criticism is dead video, it's not necessarily about tearing someone down who has a different opinion than me. What it is about is protecting the integrity of film and film discussion. Because these days there are a lot of people giving their opinions on film, and frankly, they have no business doing so. The type of people who aren't really being constructive, but they are judging a movie based on their own personal biased agenda. Those are the people whose opinions I do not respect. I'm talking about the people on Twitter who just say things for likes, or the critics on Rotten Tomatoes whose opinions are very clearly influenced by factors other than just the quality of the film. And I am a firm believer that these people do not deserve the platform that they have, because a lot of times they are manipulating audiences away from a film that frankly deserves a lot more recognition. Oppenheimer currently has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes and is doing very well at the box office. But that hasn't stopped some people from trying to sabotage it. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
If you need any more proof of how film discussion over the past few years has taken a turn for the worst, then I would encourage you to look no further than the Barbenheimer movement.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
As a lover of cinema, it's unfortunate to me that a work of art like Oppenheimer will now be forever tied to a movie like Barbie. In fact, I think it really is doing Oppenheimer a disservice by putting those two films in the same conversation with each other. And we have a lot of gimmicks and social media bullshit to thank for that.
Why are you the way that you are?
Over the past few days, I've seen people taking issue with Oppenheimer because it quote-unquote glorifies an ugly moment in American history. Tell me that you didn't watch the movie without telling me that you didn't watch the movie. Because if you actually watched it, nothing in Oppenheimer actually glorifies this situation at all. In fact, if you walk out of this movie and come to the conclusion that the events depicted are nothing short of a tragedy, then apparently you weren't paying attention.
So I strongly suggest that you wake the up.
We need to stop acting like things from the past didn't happen just because you are uncomfortable having that conversation. To me, Christopher Nolan told a true story in a brilliant way, and more importantly than that, it's an important story because it is a cautionary tale. And if you can't appreciate that, then I don't know what to tell you. If that's how you feel, then maybe you shouldn't be discussing film, and you should just stick to making bold claims to your 200 Twitter followers. And it didn't just stop with social media. Critics got in on the act, going as far as to even insulting Christopher Nolan himself.
You about to cross some lines.
Guys,
Like Grace Randolph from beyond the trailer, and the clueless one herself had this to say about Oppenheimer. Quote, a misfire for Nolan. Too talky, and like many of his films, lacks emotion. The story is hard to follow and unfair to history, but the film looks good with some good performances, even if most of the characters are unlikable. Also, not good use of IMAX. Now, this is the type of reaction I'd expect from a normie, and I even said this in my own review, this movie is not going to please everyone. But I'm assuming Grace Randolph considers herself to be a critic, and I'm sorry, but I don't know how you watch Oppenheimer and respond to it in this way when looking at it from a critical perspective.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Unless, of course, you went into it with a built-in bias against the movie itself or the man making it. A misfire for Nolan, and it's too talky? I guess Grace isn't so great with the words after all. First of all, Christopher Nolan has never really had a misfire. Even his worst movie is better than 75% of the things that Grace Randolph shills for. Also, to suggest that Christopher Nolan films typically lack emotion is one of the most tone-deaf and ridiculous criticisms I think I've ever heard. You're gonna sit there and tell me with a straight face that Matthew McConaughey's character in Interstellar crying over his daughter's lost transmissions didn't hit you emotionally? And even if you wanted to just keep the conversation on Oppenheimer, this entire story is built off emotion, even more so than any Nolan film prior to it. I'm sorry, but to say that this film lacks emotion is not an observation, It's flat out lying and verging on slander.
You sit on a throne of lies.
As far as her criticism that all of the characters are unlikable, this is a typical thing that comes up in modern film discussion. Usually when you have nuanced characters that are morally ambiguous, the shallow minds of some in the modern audiences can't seem to wrap their minds around that. They feel more comfortable with one-dimensional characters that leave absolutely nothing to the imagination.
Whoopie do. Hey, I'm impressed.
If you can't feel something for the character of Oppenheimer, as his dreams and aspirations quickly turn into a nightmare, then I have to question whether or not you have taste in quality film at all. Christopher Nolan typically invites audiences to think a little bit during his films, and apparently that's too much to ask for some. And you wonder why I feel a responsibility to protect great films and filmmakers when people try to disrespect them.
Not up in here!
Not up in here!
Do me a favor, stick to watching movies like Barbie and leave the real film discussion to people who actually have something relevant to say. Odie Henderson of the Boston Globe is up next, a top critic by the way, and he said, quote, "What I can say for sure is that Oppenheimer for too often feels like a 3-hour Wikipedia entry more so than a compelling film. Strange because I've never known a Wikipedia entry to be anywhere near as compelling as this film actually is. And regardless of what Odie says, believe me, it is just that. How a critic can watch this movie and not get wrapped up in its execution, I'll never understand. It is a literal ticking time bomb of a movie that builds and builds and builds. And if I had to guess, this guy was probably more concerned about when his next bathroom break was going to be.
I gotta go pee. I'm gonna go home.
No, it's not compelling at all when you see characters struggling with this concept that the thing that they're creating could potentially end the world. What reason would you have to be invested in that, right? Please stick to writing puff pieces at the Globe and stop reviewing movies. And finally, we have Kevin Carr of Fat Guys at the Movies, who calls Oppenheimer bloated and overblown. Nolan shows little respect and understanding of actual science while he builds a convoluted narrative.
You serious?
For reference, this is the same person who called the Flash film a high watermark for the DC universe. The guy who loved Flash is calling Oppenheimer convoluted. Please make it make sense. My guess is there wasn't enough cheap nostalgia bait and fan service in Oppenheimer to hold Kevin's attention. This is a long movie, no doubt, but Nolan uses every second of that 3-hour runtime masterfully. He also shows an immense respect for the science itself, especially when you have people who actually worked with Nolan say that the man is so brilliant he can actually explain quantum physics to them. So maybe Kevin's lack of standards and lack of understanding of what a great film actually is contributed to his nonsensical review.
You lose! Good day, sir!
Bottom line here, folks, is whether or not you are invested in this film or its subject matter is irrelevant. If you'd rather watch pointless CGI fest type movies, then you are entitled to do so. But just learn to have a little bit of respect for the people who have dedicated themselves to preserving the value of the art form of cinema. Maybe open your mind to the possibility that you might have to actually think when you're watching movies, sometimes, especially if you like to consider yourself a critic. And if you choose to give in to those possibilities, then there may even be a chance that you would be interested in discussing a movie a bit longer than your attention spans will typically allow.
Y'all be cool. Right on.